Hello, everyone. We are literally a minute away from 12 noon, and I'm going to do that theater thing and get us to start on time. But before we do, please take out your cell phones, devices, anything that makes a noise. I'm happy for you to have it on vibrate, and of course, you can use it to take as many pictures and videos as you wish, and hopefully you will share it widely and tag these incredible people, and of course, the stage production that is coming up. What is custom at the festival is for me and these two incredible individuals to Hanan for 45 minutes and then give you 15 minutes of questions. There are some incredible individuals in the audience that I'd rather actually give you a lot more time, if that's okay, so that we can go through as many questions as possible. Make them nice questions, one. Two, be succinct with your questions so that don't present a thesis before you ask the question. So that we can go through as many of them as possible, if that is okay. And I have veto power to say we will not take that question now. And you can literally take it to the tafel where Damon is going to be to sign books and then ask him personally. Sylvaine, I'm afraid you're going to miss because she's probably going back to the rehearsal room. But thank you very much for coming to this very special session at the Open Book Festival, because this is a book festival. So ordinarily, I'd be having Damon across me and probably with other authors, and we'll be talking about the actual book and what is written in the book. And I'm sure many of you have come here wanting to know more. There are thousands of interviews done over the last year, and I'm going to invite you to go to YouTube and actually watch and listen to as many of those as possible. Because the purpose of this session is to talk about the adaptation of this book to what promises to be an amazing play, directed, of course, by Sylvaine. And we'll be exploring those aspects of the process that they followed and what we can look forward to when it premieres on the 14th of September. That's in however many days from now, and it will be downstairs. World premiere will be happening here, and I hope you're all going to buy your tickets and come enjoy and delight. Please help me welcome both Sylvaine and Damon. Sylvaine, not only because you're a lady, but because we are talking about the theatre adaptation of the book, how are the rehearsals going?
Well, I arrived 15 minutes before we started here, which is a big sign because I thought I'd never get here. We're very, very, very happy to be running. We've been running since Tuesday this week. So it feels like it's got a shape and a form and it's intact and it's holding. So it's going well. It's going well. Have you seen any of the rehearsals yet?
I certainly have, yes.
And?
No, there's no reason for that anxious laughter. It's going very, very, I think it's going exceptionally well. It's been a few days since I was there, but every time I've checked in, it takes a giant leap forward. So I'm excited.
And out of interest, is it presenting in the shape that you imagined?
Very much, partly because the shape that I imagined is one that I dreamed up with Sylvaine in conversation. So it's a shape we kind of talked about before I even sat down to the task of putting it on paper. So the shape was cooked up between us. So that shape's just really been carried forward in the theatrical part of the process, which is Sylvaine's baby.
And that's where she's queen, obviously, right? She's won many awards for the work that she does. Is he giving you carte blanche to obviously work with the text, or do you have to consult him every 2 days? What do you mean by this line that is delivered by this character?
We've been talking for approximately 16 months now.
Wow.
It's without a doubt the longest pre-production phase I've ever had. And it's a great gift to be able to sit in something as long as this. Briefs are often given, the month before you start. Research starts and it's scrambled and you start a production. So as a director, to be able to sit with a concept for as long as I have, and certainly to be able to interact with Damon every step of the way, from the initial imaginings of what this could look like in the theatrical form, to seeing the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth draft by Damon has been an extraordinary experience for me, and it continued to grow in the rehearsal room with Damon very present in the first 2 weeks, I would say. So he was always there, which was extraordinary and a real gift to have him in the room. And then he stepped away for a while and would come at the end of each week. To a large extent, it's been a collaboration more than well, it's up to you now, you know. And it's how we've chosen it to be. And right from the start, I would never have gone close to doing this without Damon on board, and that was really my condition for the whole thing.
So who approached who? Who said, this is an amazing, amazing book, let's turn it into a stage production?
I approached Sylvaine. So yeah, that's how it started rolling.
Because I mean, and you've interviewed extensively on this. You had started the book initially. You then put it on pause because you were asked to work on a film project. You had an unfriendly experience with the director. You came back to the book. Well, your words, not mine.
I'm just impressed at how much research you've done.
And then the process you undertook to, I suppose, write the screenplay influenced on how you then came back and approached this book. So one thinks, and when you read it, you see the cinematography, you see the filming aspect of it. Talk to us about the process of taking it from a book where you're writing with a film in mind, in inverted commas, to then adapting it to a play, because as you'll appreciate, the two mediums demand very different things.
Yeah, I mean, the aspect of the film script that carried over into the narrative structure of the book have really to do with the way a camera moves.
Yeah.
One has the illusion watching a film that it's an ongoing, continuous experience because those cuts are seemingly instantaneous, but you can move very rapidly from one place or point of view to another. And I sort of adopted those rules in the writing of the book. Now, obviously, those are not rules you can carry over into a stage production. It's not possible to do instantaneous cuts or changes in points of view. So initially, I was skeptical, to be honest, that it was adaptable. It does not suggest itself as the most obvious material for a play. There are elements in there that are dramatic, that would work, for scenes. And there's certainly confrontations of various kinds. But the narrative technique of the book is not easily exportable. And it was really only when I sat down with Sylvaine at the very beginning of this process, we sat down for a full week and talked through the book. And I was quite frank about the sections that I just didn't see a way through. And I said, I don't see how to do this. And fortunately for me, Sylvaine did see a way through all of those places. And in fact, a very simple theatrical solution often provided the way through what seemed, impossible to me. So between us, we established, by agreement, a kind of range of language, if you like, for the play to work in. And then, I sort of sat down to the task of trying to put that on paper. But that process is still ongoing, although we're at the very end of that, because actors need stuff to be fixed. But we had a reading of the play back in January and a week's workshop, which is a rare luxury in South African theatre. And on the back of both of those interactions, I was able to go back to the script and work with it again, because writing words on a page is one thing, hearing an actor speak them is something else entirely, and you begin to realize the possibilities.
And how different then is draft one from whatever the current draft number is that you're working off now?
It's different, but not hugely, not unrecognizably different. It's more a case of modifying the approach, realizing that perhaps you're using too many words in one place, too few in another, that often you can crystallize in an image what it takes half a page to expound in words, and so on. I mean, the bottom line with theater is that words are theoretically expendable, right? I mean, you can have a full-on theatrical experience that really does things for you without a single word being spoken. I mean, there are theatre forms that don't employ words at all, like mime, and Sylvaine happens to be trained in mime, amongst other things. So part of the reason I approached Sylvaine is because her work in physical theatre is so very strong. And my sense was that we would have to be telling the story through physical means as well as through language.
Because Sylvaine, the challenge then in adapting a book of this, both epicness as well as intimacy, I really got that sense about
exactly
the book,
that, yeah.
it is in many ways a family story. It is very much about the drama that happens between the family members. It's told over time. It is in the backdrop and context of South Africa. It is very filmic in its nature, so you get that sense. So as a director, you have to capture elements of that and have an audience of 100,000 people who've all read the book and have created their own images, and they need to be satisfied by what you put on stage.
It's a huge challenge to be able to meet everyone's expectation of what it might be. And the answer to that is to do it in a collective way with the actors who have all read the book many times and who have passed on to me what they feel the book makes them feel. So going on the collective feeling of a place, a scene, how relationships struck them in the book. We've got to find the voice that is able to articulate that. And very often, as Damon says, it's a voice that is heightened and physicalized. I've never come across a book that feels like a hybrid of film, theatre, and literature, quite as the promise is. And so it frees one, as opposed to presenting a problem, I find it freeing for it to have this fluidity within which one can find a system to edit a scene visually and jump to the next scene without changing location, with characters played by actors that shift at the dime. Just putting on glasses or putting on a jacket means they will change into something and someone else. So yeah, the expectations are huge, but if we make it our own, we present, I suppose, an encounter of what the book and an audience will feel when they get the emotive language that the promise leaves with you. And that's really what I've tried to excavate, is what does the promise leave you with?
Yeah. What Damon does very well, as any good author does, is takes you into the subconscious and the emotion and the feeling and the thinking of a character, and you're able to read over paragraphs sometimes what a moment, an incident, a reflection, a memory is doing to that person emotionally and otherwise. How in heaven's name do you capture that on stage?
Well, with very good writing and the visual to support it, and the other way around sometimes. The internal world of a character can be portrayed physically, which I think the actors are understanding very well after the workshop that we did, that it would have to be shown in a different way because it cannot be cerebral, it cannot be intellectualized. The experience you have while reading is such a private journey, it's such a subjective journey of how Anton looks or how Amor looks. What they're feeling is how you are feeling at that time. You respond to a certain character at that time. So I guess tapping into, again, a collective sense of what are we feeling from every single character, and how do we enter that visually with the support of Charles-Johann Lingenfelder's musical soundscape as well, which is an incredible emotive tool to be using. I'm using choreography and minimal costuming, but it is assisting all of these shifts, and particularly the cerebral shifts of actors and characters. So it spans 30 to 40 years, and how they age and how life trods on them, I suppose, is what I'm interested in showing.
You're quite famous in not necessarily always geolocating or time locating works that you've done before. It could be classical pieces that everybody knows as written about, and you give it something different because you don't necessarily, through costume or anything like that, locate it in a particular area, time frame, whatever. Are you adapting a similar approach here? Because the passage of time is important. The passage of the decades is important.
Yeah. So immediately, I've been asked, well, how are you going to do the 80s, the 90s, and the 2000s accurately and costume-wise? And I think the only answer to that was that it feels like, The Promise feels like a story that is allegorical as well as incredibly real for us. So we can transpose it to a place where the neutral palette that the chorus is in, and the chorus are my 9 actors to serve the story, they're all in a similar muted tone of costume, and it's a classical costume. It's a shirt and pants which aren't necessarily period specific or fashion specific. It's open to interpretation. And actually, as much as it is a South African story, it could happen anywhere, which is strange. It touches on themes that certainly are universal.
And Damon, we were chatting before the audience came in that the book has been translated into 35 languages, which I imagine has caught you by surprise.
Yeah, somewhat. I mean, it's not what you expect when you publish a book. Your hope is that you're going to, get published in one language. So, yeah, so it was, of course, one of the blessings bestowed by the booker, I guess.
That is true. How do you, in your mind, I suppose, connect that with the fact that, as you've said in interviews you've done, this is possibly the most South African of the books that you have published? I repeat, the backdrop and the context is South Africa, and it is an important aspect of the narrative, but it's not the defining aspect of the narrative. Were people tuning into the family, the intimate elements, do you think, which makes it possible for it to be translated so many languages?
I mean, it really was a fear while I was writing the book that it was so South African in nature that it wouldn't carry. That, it's always a realistic possibility that you're going to be turned down by publishers because they simply think they can't sell this book, because that's the bottom line. But something in me sort of was determined to go ahead anyway. I felt the South African key turn in the lock, and I wanted to speak and think as a South African, as myself in this book. And yeah, to my surprise, in fact, it has resonated in other societies that don't necessarily share our history or our issues. So yeah, I would speculate that family is a very big element in that. All of us have a family, and the family is, the kind of raw material of this particular narrative. The racial hierarchy of South Africa is obviously very particular to apartheid and this part of the world, but hierarchies per se are not unfamiliar elsewhere. I mean, I've had Indian readers speak to me about, the caste system and how that was their way into the book. But the Western world is very much founded on capitalist principles, which are based around a hierarchy anyways. There are always dispossessed and poor people. And this book is about that. Some people who have power and land, and other people who have neither. So yeah, I guess these particular themes and issues are not, although they're codified in a recognizably South African way in this book, they themselves are maybe more universal than South Africans often realize, perhaps.
As a reader, I was absolutely invited to reflect on South Africa's story. There is the promise that is made on the dying bed of Amo's mother, Lisa Mo thinks she overhears it, made to the father for Salome. But there's also the metaphorical promise that was made in 1994 for South Africans, right? And 29 years into a democracy, we have a South Africa that is not even anywhere near where we are supposed to be, where the promise of a constitutional democracy and what that represented for South Africans is realized. We live in a country that has more than half of the population living below the poverty line. We live in a country where there's an exploitation, if you like, of incidents of, political discourse in order to break into shops and steal. Yes, sometimes flat screen TVs and fridges you don't need, but sometimes food and things that are quite basic. How much of the book, as an author, was a social commentary on where South Africa is right now?
I didn't set out with that intention. My feeling was that I guess in previous books looked at other aspects of, political, if you like, South Africa, although I think more of our history than our politics. But with this book, really, initially, I wanted to look at this family, and I wanted to look at how the family and individuals in the family change through time. As I get older, I become more and more obsessed personally with the passage of time, and it seems to me maybe the theme that should trump all others. And yet, part of the passage of time very much in this country is the transformation of history, of politics. We've been through dramatic changes in this country, historically speaking, that lots of other places don't experience. Certainly not in the kind of compressed period of the last 40 years that we've been through. These are existential upheavals. And I really believe on a very basic level what happens in the state happens in the home as well. Those connections are not always obvious or direct, but they play out. They play out, in much more private and intimate ways than would be immediately obvious. So I guess in some ways I was trying to do that through the lens of this family and the kind of what might feel like personal shifts and changes and evolutions as they go through time, to show the kind of larger changes happening in the country. But I was thinking of that as backdrop, You could talk about it as a political book, and lots of commentators have, but in fact there's no name of any political party is mentioned in the book. The name of each president comes up in each section of the book, really just to denote the era of that particular decade, because there are 4 funerals and 4 decades that we cover. But that's it, really, as far as political analysis goes. It's really what's showing up around this issue of land, and particularly the issue of this patch of really tough, unworkable land with a broken down house on it that's been promised to Salome, who's the black lady that's worked for this family for a very long time. And that's a personal issue, but it's also obviously a hugely political one.
Absolutely, because even though Salome's son, for example, who we see through the passage of time and towards the end is quite a revolutionary, for lack of a better word, and very much making statements that are similar to, one would argue, what the statements and the rhetoric that the Born Frees are doing, right? They were born post-1994, but they're calling Mandela a sellout for not negotiating for economic freedom as much as he did for political freedom. And even though you get elements of that, I must confess as a reader, I never got a sense that, one, you were necessarily telling me what your view is on the socio-political dynamic of South Africa. 2, and more importantly, you were not manipulating me into coming to a position, if you know what I mean. I imagine that was intentional, perhaps not, but as a reader, I appreciated that I was left to my own devices to make my own decisions and reflections on South Africa. Does that aspect carry through to the play?
It absolutely does, and it has to. So that, I guess that neutrality brings to the fore images which evoke and that we respond to, but it never waves a finger at our face, which the book never does. presents the whole picture, and it presents, as you say, the promise being a promise that we believed in and that perhaps we don't anymore as a nation. So yeah, that neutrality is absolutely pivotal to the production.
Why funerals? Why not initiation ceremonies? Why not weddings? Why not birthday parties?
Because I'm just a gloomy guy. Partly that's true, but also partly it's just the happenstance of how I got the first idea for this book, which was in a conversation with a friend at lunch, and he was telling me the story of his 4 family funerals. He's the last surviving member of his family. His brother, his sister, his parents have preceded him. But he's also a very funny raconteur, so he was telling anecdotes of stuff that happens around funerals, which are family gatherings, right? Like initiations or weddings. I could have used those, you're right. But
It wasn't a criticism. It was
no,
just,
no, no. I'm
just a
not being
question.
oversensitive, but it's basically the first idea I got for it was being struck through the anecdotes that he was telling me that the same people were coming up, at each funeral, but older, and that a lot of the same behavior got played out. And I thought, well, that's an interesting way. Actually, the part of my brain that lit up is the part that's quite excited by theater, because it's sort of like a play, right? The curtain goes up, and then you see this group of characters doing whatever they're doing, and the book's written in the present tense, so you don't really move much out of that frame. And then it drops, and when it comes up again, like 9 or 10 years have passed, and these people are older, but some of them are doing some of the same things. So there's something theatrical in that DNA, basically, to start with. But, the other aspect, a more serious aspect, is, I really was quite preoccupied with time and the passage of time and the changes that it brings. And, the gloomy, again, fact of the matter is that journey through time, which each of us is on, ends with a funeral. Sorry to tell you. But, that's the full stop at the end of the sentence, guys. We're all at different points of the sentence, but that is the last terminus. So, you want to look at time, you have to look at where time stops, at least for each of us individually. So it made a kind of thematic sense to structure it that way.
No, for sure. When people die in I suppose I'm Xhosa, I'm from Cape Town, there'll be a daily gathering for prayer and all of that, and there's an expression that is shared, "Agwehlanga elingehlanga," which means this which has happened before, because death happens all the time, right? I would argue it's a necessary part of living. And yet despite the tons of funerals we've all experienced, all organized, all went to, you're right, we go back to be behaving exactly the same way as we did before. You have a fantastic cast.
I really do.
Like, this is gold.
There's no price on those guys.
But there's no narrator.
How do you know?
Okay, we'll leave it there.
No, it's an interesting point, and I would like to...
It is a very important point.
Absolutely key to this process from the first conversations with Sylvaine was that solution, because an obvious course to take is to use a narrator, but Sylvaine pointed out the book works on a choral effect.
Yes.
And chorus comes, certainly Western theater emerges from the Greek tradition, and that is based around a chorus. So, the choral solution, although I used it in the book, actually comes from theater, and that was absolutely key. So we have multiple narrators who kind of function as one. Basically.
All right, so there will be narrators basically on the stage. That's what I wanted to get. It's now 28 minutes past 12. Can I have the house lights up, please? And then please shoot up your hand for questions, and a microphone will be coming to you. There's a gentleman who's wearing the light jacket with blonde hair. We can go to you first. If you can introduce yourself and then your question, please.
Hi, thank you. Wonderful to hear this talk. My name is Cameron. I work for News 24, covering the festival this weekend. So that's why I'm asking questions in every session if anyone else is here who hears me. No, I think I remember reading somewhere that the Four Funeral things also was kind of inspired, or at least is parallel to Faulkner's As I Lay Dying, I think, or one of those Faulkner things. And when I heard the idea for the play, I was reminded of Our Town by Thornton Wilder, which a lot of us studied in drama and that kind of thing. I'm not sure. I mean, that's just my projection of what inspirations could have been. But did you have any like particular plays or things in mind for to kind of inspire the adaptation, or did the novel itself have any particular models of other books or things that inspired it? Thank you.
Thank you, Cameron.
No, I mean, it's certainly true that the spirit of Faulkner kind of hovered over the creation of the book. I mean, I thought I referenced mentally a lot of the modernists in the writing of the book because they played so much with voice and with time, and the book, I think, is trying to do something like that. No, I mean, I certainly didn't model the structure of the book on anything else. If it was, I mean, it's more obviously modeled if you're going to take Faulkner as an inspiration on Sound and the Fury, I guess, which is split up into 4 sections. But As I Lay Dying is built around voices, so I guess to that extent it was on my mind. But so was, Virginia Woolf, so was Samuel Beckett. Yeah, I don't think you can write a book or you can make any kind of creative work that's modeled on something else, or rather you can do it, but it's always going to be a little bit inauthentic and secondhand. So yeah, really the spirit that seized me most of all was my inner South African. I wanted to, more than anything, my inner Praetorian. It was a very particular place and time to grow up in, and in some senses the book is a kind of extended revenge upon my past.
And mine.
And yours, you say. Thank you very much. Next question. There's a question down here. Any therapists in the house?
Hello. First of all, thank you for giving me my favorite book that I've ever read. And my question is, in your adaptation, did you, by necessity or otherwise, have to expand on the original material? Did you add anything new? Or if you didn't, why not?
Well, yes, I mean, stuff firstly has shifted around. I really didn't feel precious about rearranging or modifying my material. Obviously, you can't take a book which covers quite a wide canvas and convey everything in 2 hours on a stage as you have to. So you have to chuck stuff. You have to be prepared to jettison chunks of material. So once you prepare to do that, you can shape it in a whole new way, which actually is necessary because theatre is a totally different organism. It has to live and breathe and work according to different principles, and you can't really adapt it without knowing that. But something which hasn't come up in our conversation is how we handle Salome, who's in many ways the central character of the book, but she's also the most silent, has no particular agency or obvious power, and her silence and her lack of agency are kind of at the heart of everything in the book. I'm actually going to let Sylvaine answer this because that's the part of the book that required the most adapting in a way and where the biggest change happened. So I'm sure Sylvaine will be more articulate than me on this particular topic.
What was wonderful about being able to adapt it to the stage is rethink how we could bring certain characters, for example, like Salome, who is so silent, and make her silence the loudest voice. And by that, one makes Salome the most visible, even though she's invisible to most of the family. She's visible in the play, in scenes where you may never have imagined her to be. There she is. And so that for me was the core drive to every scene that we're doing. Where is she? What is she doing? We live in a society where our entire existence is permeated by the hands of the housekeeper. Our teaspoon, our toilet seat, the sheets that we sleep in, the floor we walk on, and yet they're invisible. And when a promise is made to someone who has served that way, as Ma says, please give her something for everything she's done for me. She nurses Ma in her dying days, and it's no news. She dies in the very first chapter. And that promise can't be fulfilled for various reasons, but mostly because she's invisible. And so, yes, that is a shift that the book has been able to take. Even though it's very much in the book, it becomes a lot more prominent in a three-dimensional live world. So that's one of the big changes, and probably the key change, as Damon says, which allows us a new lens through which to see things.
And I mean, to cast Kuma Sopotela for that role.
She is beyond extraordinary.
I can imagine. Sure. I'm salivating. Next question. There's one here. Sorry, ma'am. We are recording this for podcasting, so we do need it to register onto.
My name's Anne. You mentioned a number of writers who influenced you. What about J.M. Coetzee? And particularly, there was a novel about a farm, I forget which one it was exactly, but a farm and a family, and I think it was his daughter that was on a farm. Was it Disgrace? Sorry, I've forgotten exactly.
Yeah, the farm features in Disgrace, but perhaps the one you're thinking of is his second novel called In the Heart of the Country. I mean, the Place Roman is an established strand in the South African literary fabric. I mean, it's part of our South African literary tradition. You know, beginning way back in colonial times, where the agenda behind the farm novel, was part of the colonial thing. You basically were projecting into what was supposed to be an empty landscape, civilization and settlement and so on. Of course, the narrative around farms and settlements has changed radically in South African fiction, and Coetzee, amongst others, was subverting the basis of that tradition with that particular book, I think. Perhaps because we're both tormented white men who come from Cape Town, I keep getting compared to J.M., which is, a flattering comparison in lots of ways, but it's very hard to creep out from under that particular shadow. I would say the South African farm novel, again, also a subversive farm novel that was far more of a heavy presence in the writing of this book, was actually Nadine Gordimer's book, The Conservationist, where, if you remember, it's a white man in Joburg who has a farm that he goes to over weekends, basically, and he acts as a conservationist, or thinks of himself as that. But a black man who dies is buried on that farm, and in a way that I guess is not entirely realistic and not meant to be, the body keeps rising to the surface, and it becomes the kind of central moral problem of the book, is to get rid of this body. Obviously a whole freight of guilt associations with that particular period are attached to that image and so on. But yeah, I mean, Coetzee is a presence, I think, for every South African writer in a way. Everyone's trying to write their way out from under him. His style has certainly been a very kind of powerful thing for me at various points, but I don't think of this book's style as being similar at all.
Not at all.
Can I add to that? I think where Damon's uniqueness comes through is to talk about this country in the way that he does, with the hilarity and dark humor that is not present in Coetzee for me. And the play has that. It has a lot of it. So if any of you are thinking, oh, it's doom and gloom, it really is hilarious. And every single cast member has funny bones, and that is why they were cast, first and foremost.
The play is definitely funnier than the book.
But the ideas came from there.
Why that shift? Why focus that, not focus, but highlight, I suppose, and press the spotlight on the funny bone, as you call it, in some of the characters?
Do you want to take that, Sylvaine?
In the play version or
In the
book?
play, yeah.
Because I think without them, we're left with theatre that leaves us hopeless, which I really am quite against. So I'm not a Pollyanna or a Mary Poppins, but I do believe that if we're going to get off our bums and go to the theatre, we've got to feel everything. And the full gamut is there. It's not like I'm imposing humor on it. It's coming directly from those 3 funerals. The 4th funeral, the first funeral is the saddest, and then the others get completely mad. And the reason of that is that I have also kept the presence of those who are past very much around.
Wow. I have so many questions.
And they've got a lot to say.
but I
They've
suppose
got a lot to
14th
say.
of September, everybody, that's when it's going to happen. Damon,
Actually, our official opening is the 19th, just to put that on the record.
That-
We
yeah.
do have
Fair
some
enough.
previews.
Previews starting on 14th to 17th, and as a Sunday show too.
Fantastic. And it will be on at this very Homecoming Centre until the 6th of October, before it goes to the Market Theatre in Joburg from the 18th of October until the 5th of November. Damon, you have said, you made reference to the chorus a little bit earlier. South Africa is very much not a chorus in harmony, hey?
It doesn't strike me as a chorus in harmony, no. No, I mean, surely that's kind of obvious. We speak with many voices in this country, and part of the struggle for South African writers, whatever book they're producing, is who they're speaking for, how to write in a voice that kind of, maybe unifies and unites so many disparate fragments. I mean, my solution, I guess, with this particular book was to let each fragment speak for itself, really. I mean, it was to include as many opposing, antagonistic points of view as possible, with a cinematic approach, jumping from one to another, hoping to jangle people's thinking in the way that the country jangles mine, frankly. And as I say, I mean, part of the theatrical language that Sylvaine and I decided upon was a kind of choral effect that allowed for that jangle to continue. Somehow we, in this country, muddle through with a narrative that seems to be moving in one direction, but again, if you study it up close, the many voices that make up the chorus here are overlapping, contradictory, talking at angles, and you'll hear and see that on stage, basically.
Some people call that jazz.
There you go.
There's a lovely line in Downton Abbey where the Dame Maggie Smith delivers when somebody says, "Oh, are you enjoying the jazz?" And then she says, "Oh, is that what they call it? Does anyone know what the other is playing?" which is quite nice. You dropped a little gift there by saying you're a tormented white man. I couldn't.
I'm going to have some wine.
I couldn't not go there. What's tormenting you, dear Damon? And how can we be of help?
At this moment, you are tormenting me. Yeah. No, it's different days, different torments, I dare say a lot of my torments are not the kind of thing that would plague most people. But, it's not easy being a human. We all struggle with stuff. So, yeah, I'm tormented by the usual human stuff, as well as, I guess, by bigger kinds of questions. If you're a writer, you're probably tormented by definition, because this is a fairly tormented process, a very solitary process. So yeah, you do kind of tie yourself in knots just in the whole creative endeavor. But in a larger sense, if you're serious in your work and the work is about more than just, I guess, daily preoccupations, you do have to spend some time thinking about whatever your subjects are and letting them sit in you and stew a bit. So yeah, that gives rise to its quotient of torment, I'm afraid. I'm not going to, delight you by giving you a laundry list of my torments, but generally, I cover quite a wide range.
Well, thank you for the tease, nonetheless. Sylvaine, we've only mentioned one of the cast members, and we only alluded to the fact that it's gold. Do you want to speak to some of the cast members you've managed to rope in for this fantastic project?
Well, yeah, I mean, as I said to you earlier, the one advantage of working on a process for as long as this is to be able to lock down cast really early. And I always go on instinct with cast, and it can go one way or the other. But the characters were so clear from the book that and when I called the casting and did the auditions, what I was looking for became apparent very, very quickly in the rehearsal room, and that was a physical intelligence, so the ability to tell a story without necessarily using words, and also the ability to be part of a workshop and a sense of collaboration, as well as being in it for the long run, which is a very hard thing to ask of actors, because making a living in theatre is not always the answer for us to survive. So they knew that they were heading into something long, and so I locked them off as early as February this year, which is very, very early for a casting process. So I spoke about the funny bones, but I've got Frank Opperman, who's an extraordinary actor and is known to some of us, but not to everybody. I think he's a well-known Afrikaans actor, but he has such an incredible range and is so wonderful in a process. Kate Normington as Ma, and this is probably an unusual role to see Kate in. She brought the goods, and I was so surprised and happy to see that option. Rob van Vuuren as Anton. There are no words, really. Anton drives the book in the sense that his energy levels are so clearly depicted, and his journey, like all the characters, but it's a kind of, it's tormented, and it's also really funny. So I needed to find the balance, and I had worked with Rob in Endgame before by Samuel Beckett, and I knew that somebody who can play Clov can play Anton.
That's true.
Jane DeVette is the first, it's her first time on stage. She's a beautiful film actress who has grown exponentially, and she is my amour, youngest in the crew, and has grown and is just showing all the qualities that we need for amour, who's the steadfast and incredibly, well, she's strange. I mean, you've all read probably that she's strange. She's been struck by lightning. She is constantly on a mission. She's never home. She's solitary. And I mean, on further discussion with Damon, and we think she might be a little on the spectrum, which is a wonderful thing for this young actress to explore, with this dogged pursuit of the promise coming to a fore. Jenny Stead, who's not unknown to audiences here, plays the middle sister Astrid with great delight. Albert Pretorius, who is just fantastic. He's the one who plays the most characters. I think he plays a total of 6. Sanda Shandu, who plays Lucas, amongst other characters. Beautiful actor. You would have seen him in King Kong, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. And then, of course, Sintane Skitter, who is a wonderful Tani Marina. Yes, and we mentioned Kuma Sopotela, who really did need to be mentioned first because of her being Salome.
In the workshop space and time, and Damon, you made reference to the fact that that also impacted on how the next draft, I suppose, was taking shape. What level of dependence did you place on the actors to bring in what they appreciated of the characters from reading it?
That workshop was mostly not based around the text at all. Sylvaine chose to take it in the direction of physicalizing it, getting them to work and function together as a chorus, which is quite a primal thing, right? You've got to get actors to tune into each other and to pick up signals that are not verbal signals necessarily, and that are often kind of unconsciously built in and that we don't really rely on. It was a fascinating and fabulous process. I mean, I trained as an actor way back, which is a sort of inconceivable notion to me now. But it really did leave a lasting impression. I mean, theater is made of movement, light, time, and sound, as far as I can see. Those are the elements that you're working with, which are the elements of life, really, of what tell us we're alive. Those are the things that are feeding your senses all the time. And the other thing, incidentally, about theatre that's very like life is how temporary it is. I mean, the beautiful thing about theatre is it's being made in front of you once off. That performance will never be repeated. It's as unique as a fingerprint. It disappears like smoke the moment it happens. These are the beautiful and, if you like, terrible things about it, that it comes into being and disappears at the same instant. So it's been. I know I'm going a little bit, off the topic that you
most
set up,
welcome.
but it's been a fantastic process for me personally to move from my solitary dungeon, where I do most of my work, to this arena where you have to interact with other people and take their energy on board and work with their talents. And it's, the collaborative, cumulative power of that process is not really reproduced in anything else. It's been a real kind of wonderful rediscovery. So sorry, I know we've ended up somewhere totally different, but I did want to say this is sort of taking me back to my roots in a way. I mean, I remember a time in my life where I was actually torn between writing books and writing plays. I mean, that was a real dilemma at one point in my life, and I've sort of gone so far down the road of books that theatre had faded in the rearview mirror. It's been great to end up there again.
So are we going to see more plays?
Very possibly, yeah. I mean, Sylvaine is a rare director as well, and I think we've made the point in this that this process has been privileged in a certain sense because we're very well funded. Yeah. We're able to have this week's workshop and a reading way back, and to have 9 actors, and to have people like Charles Johan doing the sound design, and to have a choreographer involved as well, and so on. These are luxuries most theatrical productions don't have in this country. The arts are not well funded, to state the obvious, and they're not well funded because they're not seen as important. So, we are aware of the fact that we're in a privileged position, and I hope we're making full use of that privilege to carry this as far as we possibly can. But it is a great pity that these things are not available to every theatrical production in this country. It is absolutely feasible and possible, and it is just one of multiple myopias that has not taken place.
I have, this year alone, seen, I would say, 58 productions already this year. And I can count in one hand the number of productions that have had 9 cast members.
Yeah.
A lot of them are either solo pieces or maximum 2-3 people.
Yeah.
To have this caliber of cast and these many people avail themselves to be part of the process, as you say, it's really a place of privilege.
And for actors to work in a company for this long, I
Yeah.
mean, when we did the workshop back in April, they each knew who they were playing. They had done a read of draft 1 and 2. And it's so interesting because the theatre time frame has got to be, we've got to bill it as how long it's running, and is it a 2-hour play, is it a 1.5-hour play, what is it? And so we had to do some cuts, and the actors got so upset. And they were defending it with Damon, like with their blood. It was an amazing session, and this was a week ago where we were all on the floor with our books just going, what has got to go? It's so unbearable, but it has to, and we've got to keep on, and
It's
they
usually
were...
the other way around, I mean, the writer's saying, you can't cut that, you can't cut that.
But
yeah.
I mean, Damon was just so incredibly generous, and I don't know if many authors would be about letting things go, and not just willy-nilly, but when actors defended it and really showed him how much they cared for a certain scene, he heard it. So it's been extraordinary.
You've got 6 minutes, so if there is one last question, I've got at least 20 more questions which I won't get through, but I'd rather give you the opportunity. No. Okay, yes, ma'am. And there's another. See, this is what happens when you tell people they don't run out of time. Actually, there's a lady with the denim shirt question, and then we'll come to you as a final question.
Hi, my name is Greta. I was intrigued when I heard that this book was going to be adapted into a play. And I immediately thought of 2 other examples from overseas. The one was the National Theatre production of The Life of Pi. And then there was also a production in England of Hamnet, the book by Maggie O'Farrell that was also a Booker Prize winner, I think. Is this a tendency, Sylvaine? I want to ask you specifically, is this a tendency in theatre at the moment? Is there a dearth of good plays? What is happening?
It's very interesting. It's a very interesting question because we've noticed a trend of that happening since COVID, in particular, and it seems to be that the collective experience is almost in demand. Like a reading of a book is such a private thing that people want to experience it together. And there really has been a spike, I mean, statistically, of books being adapted over the last 3 years. And A Life of Pi, Hamnet come to mind, along with many others. And before COVID, there was Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, those things. But there's been a real spike of that recently, and particularly in a physicalized form. So there's almost like a relish of wanting to see something come alive in a very theatricalized way, off the page and experienced as a group, like you would want sport to happen again when we couldn't play sport during COVID. That sense of coming together to witness something that is normally very private. That seems to be the trend, yeah.
Thank you for that.
Hello. Sorry, my name's Mary. Thank you so much. It was a fantastic, I'm sorry, I don't know if you can hear me. Fantastic read. And given that the title of this is From Page to Stage, can you actually see it going back to page? I know that it sounds like the script is still kind of evolving. Is there a point that you can imagine it being published as a script? Or is that just something that's kind of a pipe dream? Coming from the Booker.
I mean, it's. I'd certainly be open to that as a proposal. I just don't imagine it happening simply because publishers make no money really from publishing scripts, and money is what drives publishing along with many other businesses. So I can't see that there'd be much economic motive for a publisher to take on the script, but yeah, it would be an interesting outcome.
I imagine it would make for a very good academic work that people can study at either school or, more importantly, at drama school. If the play is anywhere as good as a book, it really, I mean, I'm sure it is. I haven't seen it yet. I haven't read it yet. So one has to trust. So therefore, ma'am, it will be published, I'm sure.
Hi, my name is Renee. I just want to add...
Audience microphone, please.
I just want to add to what you teaches South African theatre at one of the universities. And when she heard the play was being done of the book, she said, please ask if there's going to be a script, because I will definitely add it to my 2025 syllabus.
Wow. Great.
Yeah, we'll see what we can do.
All right, we've got 1 minute left. Damon, what are you working on next?
In theory, a book of short stories, which I was contracted to deliver quite a long time ago. But yeah, the Booker axe fell upon my head, and things have slowed down dramatically. So I'm still in the aftermath of that. But yeah, short stories, I hope, is what will eventually be the next thing I sign my name to.
And has winning the Booker Prize been a joyful experience, or has it been a tormented experience?
I'm a kind of talented alchemist. I can turn all joy into misery if I really put my mind to it. It's been a bit of a mixture, is the truth. I mean, the affliction of most writers is the struggle to get any kind of attention at all, and this is very much the opposite problem, which is a very. It makes me seem ungrateful to complain about it, and actually the truth is nobody feels sorry for me. So it's been wall-to-wall joy, Africa. Let's just leave it there.
A round of applause, please, for David. Oh, good. And Sylvaine Strike. The Promise on stage opens right here, not this stage, the one downstairs, right? Homecoming Center. It opens on the 19th with previews from the 14th. It will run in Cape Town until the 6th of October. And then from the 18th of October until the 5th of November, it will be at the Market Theatre in Johannesburg. It's got an exceptional cast. You've heard a lot about what you may experience in the audience, in the auditorium, witnessing what is on stage. Sylvaine, I cannot wait to see what you've done with it. It really just, you're one of my favorite directors, as you're very well known. And Damon, thank you for the gift. Really, it is, I mean, I'm sad not to have seen you on stage because I'm sure I would have loved you, but I'm glad also because you've produced such wonderful, wonderful material. And write another play. I cannot wait to see this on stage, and good luck with it.
Thank you.
Sylvaine is going to have to rush back to the rehearsal room, I'm afraid. So if you want to grab a private question, make it very quick. And Damon is going to be at the Tafel, which is the really homecoming center, signing books, and then you can also get him to answer some questions that you have. Thank you very much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the festival.
Thank you.